Airtight control begins with a truthful inventory that separates wireless into real, usable segments with names, owners, and purposes that match what clients actually see. Document guest, corporate, and any CDE-adjacent networks in writing. Then validate the list with scans and floor-by-floor walkthroughs so map and air match each other. Label each SSID with the authentication method, encryption suite, VLAN or virtual network mapping, and the gateway that enforces policy, because evidence must tie the name on the laptop to the rule at the boundary. Keep a register of locations, access points, controller clusters, and change tickets for channel plans and power levels so that future reviewers can understand how a new store or office was added without silent drift. The best programs pair the inventory with recency and coverage metrics, last seen times for radios, counts of clients by segment, and alerting on unexpected beacons, so surprises cannot hide between quarterly reviews, and so scope decisions rest on fresh facts rather than memory. Remote access requires the same discipline, and hardened gateways must mediate every external path with defense that balances friction and assurance. Place virtual private network, VPN, or zero-trust access brokers at edges you can monitor and patch quickly, and require multifactor authentication, MFA, device posture checks, and session logging for all privileged users and vendors. Policy should describe which roles may request access, which device health signals are required, which networks are permitted after login, and where session transcripts or detailed logs are stored with retention that outlasts disputes. Evidence should include gateway configurations, conditional access rules, screen or command recordings for admin sessions, and routing policies that constrain users to the tasks they came for rather than to a broad flatland. An assessor will expect to follow one privileged connection from request to approval to login to contained movement, seeing both the identity decisions and the network decisions as cooperating safeguards rather than independent hopes. Split tunneling is the common convenience that often becomes the critical gap, so disable it for any path that could influence in-scope systems or data. Route all traffic through controlled inspection points while a session is active, so data loss prevention, intrusion detection, and logging can work with complete pictures rather than partial guesses. Document the client profiles that enforce full tunnel behavior and the exceptions, if any, with business justification, expiry dates, and specific monitoring to compensate where policy must bend for a narrow use case. During assessments, provide packet captures and gateway logs that demonstrate all traffic during an active session exited and re-entered through monitored devices, and show an explicit denial when the client attempts to reach the open internet directly. The aim is to prove that you do not rely on user discipline to keep work and web separated. You rely on network rules that make risky shortcuts unavailable and whose operation is visible in records you can hand to strangers.
Administration of sensitive systems should never be reachable directly from wireless or from any remote client without passing through hardened jump hosts that can see, shape, and record. Write this rule plainly. No direct management access into CDE assets from user devices ever. And then prove it with connection tests that fail at the perimeter and that succeed only from the approved jump tier after MFA and ticket checks. Jump systems should be minimal by design, patched on cadence, restricted to admin tools only, and instrumented with session capture that shows who did what and when, with system identifiers visible so timelines make sense later. Publish the small playbook that operators follow to start and end a session, tie it to approvals that cite change or incident tickets, and keep a record of the last 3 reviews where leadership sampled sessions and confirmed policy was followed. The pattern you want to show is not just "we said no direct access," but "we tried and failed, as designed, and we can prove the jump route was used instead."
Credentials and certificates must live on short clocks because stale secrets are attackers' favorite leftovers. Rotate wireless enterprise credentials, machine certificates, gateway admin passwords, and vendor tokens on schedules that match their risk and usage, and make revocation an immediate step on role change, offboarding, or contractor departure. Store rotation evidence with dates, owners, and the artifacts that show the new state certificate, certificate serials, directory entries, device counts updated, and keep a feed from human resources so account life cycles and identity stores stay synchronized without manual drift. If service accounts or embedded credentials exist for legacy systems, fence their use behind brokers that log use and limit scope while you work toward elimination, and document compensating controls with expiry to avoid permanent exceptions. Assessors reading your evidence should see a living heartbeat, things issued, renewed, and retired on visible schedules, rather than a set of long-lived secrets nobody remembers until a breach report writes their names in public. Detection turns control into assurance because it lets you prove both success and failure quickly. Monitor for failed logins at gateways and controllers, for unusual geolocation patterns that suggest impossible travel or credential abuse, and for after-hours administrative activity that deviates from declared maintenance windows. Add context to alerts so responders can decide without reinvestigating every time. Show originating IP and ASN, device posture status, recent password or factor changes, and the mapped role's normal hours or locations. Feed these events to a place where security and operations both watch, and tie them to a triage matrix that sets response time by asset criticality and proximity to the CDE. What convinces an assessor is not that you never see odd patterns, but that spikes are investigated in time, recorded with clarity, and turned into tuning or training that shows your system learns. Third-party and vendor access require the tightest windows and the clearest proof because outside identities carry risks you cannot see day to day. Limit vendor access to defined periods tied to tickets or scheduled support. Require just-in-time approvals that expire soon, and record every session with enough detail that your team can reconstruct actions without relying on vendor notes. Keep vendor identities out of internal directories when possible. Route them through brokers that enforce your MFA, device posture, and logging so you do not depend on distant policies you cannot audit. Review vendor access logs weekly in a short cadence that asks who connected, for what reason, for how long, and to which systems. And close the loop on old or unused accounts with written revocation that names the owner and date. The goal is simple. Vendors help, then leave a trail that belongs to you, not to a memory of a call. Controls deserve tests that mirror real-world attempts. So plan war driving, remote login drills, and packet captures that prove enforcement is live, not theoretical. Drive or walk the perimeter with detectors that show your SSIDs appearing where you expect and no further. Then sample from public areas to confirm guests cannot reach corporate resources even when signal is strong. Run remote access drills where a privileged user attempts to connect from odd locations with unhealthy devices and outside normal windows, and collect the denials and alerts that should follow, with screenshots and logs attached to an organized packet. Capture traffic at gateways during a drill to demonstrate full tunnel behavior and to show that monitoring sees both directions of a session. Then file those captures with captions that say what each proves and who observed it. When tests live on a calendar and produce artifacts on a shelf, assurance becomes routine instead of an annual scramble. Governance keeps air and wire from drifting, so align leaders, operators, and assessors around simple cadences that turn numbers into choices. Review key metrics monthly: percent of devices on enterprise off, number of rogue investigations with outcomes, remote access sessions by role and hour, jump host session counts with sample replays, rotation completion rates for certs and secrets, alert volumes and response times, and write a short narrative that names one fix for friction and one improvement to detection. Tie findings to training where needed. Short refreshers for store staff on seal checks and visitor behavior, quick guides for admins on approved jump workflows, and onboarding notes for vendors that explain your expectations in plain language. When governance minutes show dates, owners, and links to artifacts, you build a habit of small, visible improvements that auditors recognize as maturity and that teams experience as clarity, not as bureaucracy. Two pitfalls appear often enough that the PCIP examiner expects you to spot them quickly, and the assessor in you should insist on evidence that they are under control. The first is trusted corporate Wi-Fi that slowly accumulates exceptions until it resembles a flat office network with a radio front door, at which point a single phished laptop becomes a lateral movement story into sensitive systems. The antidote is to enforce the same segmentation discipline on wireless that you keep on wired, with explicit denies, narrow allows, and monitoring that connects a client to a boundary decision you can read later. The second pitfall is remote access brokered through third-party tools that just work by tunneling around your gateways, leaving logs in someone else's cloud and policies you cannot enforce. The antidote is to route all remote admin through your brokers with your rules, and to document vendor exceptions with expiry, session capture, and compensating controls that you can test and show. When scope conversations arise, use wireless and remote evidence to make claims calm and credible rather than aspirational. For wireless, show that guest SSIDs route only to the Internet through specific gateways, that corporate SSIDs reach only application tiers through defined firewalls, and that no management protocols are permitted from any client segment. Then attach captures and denies with rule identifiers that match exported configurations. For remote access, show that every privileged session flows through brokers with MFA, posture, and recording, that split tunneling is disabled and enforced, and that jump hosts are the only path to administrative interfaces. Then attach a sample session with transcript and approvals. When your scoping logic reads like a recipe and your artifacts snap into place without argument, you narrow audits to interesting questions and keep pressure from turning a known strength into a debate about missing proofs. Close with a week 1 posture that proves the habit rather than the hope. Schedule a wireless sweep that covers a representative set of locations, front of house, back office, loading areas, and parking perimeters, and produce a short packet with signal maps, rogue investigations, and controller policy excerpts that match what your clients saw. In the same week, rehearse remote access controls with a planned drill that attempts unhealthy, out-of-hours, and unexpected origin logins for both staff and a vendor, capturing the denials, the alerts, and one successful, fully recorded jump host session tied to a ticket. Announce the 2 actions in a simple note that names owners and dates, then file the artifacts on the same shelf as your standing evidence for wireless and remote, with one-line captions that say what each item proves. Small, visible checks, repeated, turn radios and remote into defensible boundaries that resist shortcuts and leave the clean trails assessors and acquirers rely on. If you remember one thread to pull through every decision here, make it traceability, that a stranger can follow from the air to the wire and from the login to the log. Wireless segments that map cleanly to gateways and rules. Authentication that ties a device and a human to an approved method. Rogues that trigger investigations with outcomes, remote access that lives behind hardened brokers with full paths recorded, and jump hosts that stand between admin intent and sensitive systems. Each of these is a habit you can show and retest without ceremony. Evidence that lives in one tidy place turns scope into a set of proven statements instead of a set of promises. And monitoring that feeds governance converts odd moments into tuned controls rather than blame. Schedule your sweep and your rehearsal this week, attach the proofs with dates and names, and you will feel the culture shift from radio convenience and remote improvisation to guarded paths that work predictably and read clearly. That is the posture the PCIP exam trains you to recognize, and the stance that keeps customers safe when distance, devices, and vendors are part of daily life. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.